December of this year, elections to the State Duma will be held. I would like to believe that during these elections, voters will have the opportunity to make a choice not between personalities, but between programs, between conceptions of economic development. The conceptual party Unity will take part in these elections, and therefore the time has come to announce our fundamentally new views on the sphere of economy. There are also two operational reasons for our program. On February the 27th, following my speech at a meeting of directors of the food and processing industry in St. Petersburg, a special statement was adopted in which the problems announced in our today's program were revealed. On April the 23rd, I was asked to make a keynote speech at a meeting of the Council of Industrialists, Vyborgsky district of St. Petersburg, with the participation of heads of enterprises. The theme of my report is included in the title of today's radio program. These facts indicate that the information state of society is changing noticeably, and our information is of interest to almost all strata of our society. Suffice it to say that only for the last month or two, my lectures, speeches have taken place in 4 schools, in 4 universities, in the FSB department of St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region, 3 lectures, at the Emergencies Ministry headquarters, and a live broadcast for Pskov television.
What circumstances in the life of our country led you to the need to work out, as you say, fundamentally new views in the sphere of economics?
This is connected with the fact that the statehood of Russia is in a paradoxical situation. In comparison with Japan, China, and countries of the Euro-American conglomerate, we have an incomparably richer natural resource potential: gas, timber, oil, gold, etc. We have the world's most educated population, powerful intellectual and administrative potential, but the overwhelming majority of our people are dragging out a beggarly existence. China has doubled its gross domestic product over the last 10 years, while Russia has cut its by almost 2 times. All the slogans proclaimed by the country's leadership at the start of perestroika are executed in exactly the opposite way. We crashed instead of accelerating, total alcoholization of the people instead of fighting it, wild capitalism instead of socialism with a human face, internal Russian war instead of strengthening friendship between peoples. These paradoxes in all spheres of our society's life do not indicate particular mistakes, but a system crisis, flaws in our world understanding, which turns out to be inadequate to objective reality. A false world understanding has led to the deepest delusions, including in the sphere of economy. At present, alarming tendencies are forming in the national economic complex of the country and, first of all, in the sector of the processing industry. They are connected with an artificially generated gap in wages between raw materials producers and processors, with an unacceptably low purchasing power of the bulk of the population, which leads to the inevitable degradation of processing industries oriented towards the domestic market. The relatively favorable evaluations of economic development that are being formed are erroneous and are connected with a significant increase in the profits of energy raw material monopolists. In fact, they have reduced their business to the ability to take money out of other people's pockets without resorting to violence by manipulating tariffs. However, the rise in prices of monopolists is connected with a landslide rise in the costs of market actors in the economy. With the help of the oil shield, it is possible to hide until a certain time the obvious flaws of the economic mechanism, the obvious deterioration of the state of affairs in the country in the processing industry, but the sadder the result will be until the moment of the protracted end of the period of oil paradise.
Could you, before we move to concretics, outline the basic worldview differences of your approach?
The big problem is that at present, behind the same term, economics, there are 2 essentially opposite systems of knowledge that lead to mutually exclusive conclusions and recommendations on each of the specific practical problems. Our system of knowledge is oriented on socially useful solutions, on the satisfaction of the natural needs of the majority of the population. We expose the currently dominant system of knowledge, which is not related to the interests of the majority. Its tasks include the working out of methods of corporate personal enrichment and the ability to pull money out of the pockets of others, providing a juridically consistent justification for this. This science is called chrematistics. Therefore, before evaluating certain economic views, conclusions, recommendations, it is important to determine from what worldview positions these evaluations are given. For example, The ratio of prices for energy resources to prices for other goods in Russia is 2 to 3 times higher than the prices in other countries. These quite high prices of electricity are a wise decision from the standpoint of the corporate interests of the managers of RAO UES of Russia, but this is a murderous decision in relation to the production sector and the population of Russia. And this decision is absolutely illiterate from our standpoint, from the standpoint of a socially useful economy. In the course of the development of capitalist relations, crematistics has become the essence and content of secular life. The development of schemes and methods of enrichment and making a profit is now proclaimed the main objective of theories which are erroneously called economic theories, remaining in essence the purest crematistics. And although these countless publications contain the term economics in their titles, strictly speaking, all this has absolutely nothing to do with economics. This explains the fact that the more so-called successes the scientists, economists achieve, the more specialists are trained in this field, the more the majority of laborers engaged in production and the provision of socially useful services find themselves in a disastrous situation. Max Amsterdam quite accurately expressed the essence of such theories and the practice based on them. Business is the art of extracting money from another man's pocket without resorting to violence. This art is the practice of promoting tariffs of natural monopolies. Their impulsive annual growth is an instrument of destabilization and ruin of the national economic complex of Russia.
Could you give 2 or 3 examples of fundamentally different solutions to some problems within the framework of the economy and within the framework of chromatistics?
I've already mentioned one of them. RAO UES of Russia raises tariffs annually within the framework of chromatistics to extract money from the pockets of the population. Within the economy, tariff revisions have to be prohibited by law. By the way, in the USA, the revision of tariffs is possible only by a special decision of the Congress. The US Federal Reserve System, our central bank, acts as a model for organizing work in line with chromatistics. De facto, everything belonging to them is private corporate property. The central bank started with an authorized capital of 3 million rubles, and during the period of perestroika, its reserves, formed on the basis of profits alone, amounted to $55 billion. They get their income by pressing a button on a money printing machine in the form of seigniorage, as the difference between the face value of the printed paper and the value of producing it. Moreover, for all printed paper sent to the production sector, including provided to the government, banks receive usurious income, while others plow, boil steel, extract coal from a mine. Within the framework of chromatistics in our country, the law allows a banking corporation to lend money at an unlimited interest rate and at the same time receive incredible income, parasitizing on others' labor. But in the history of humanity, there were periods when usury was prohibited and punishable by death. And in the Quranic culture, Quran, Surah 2, 275, usury is prohibited in principle as the most serious sin. It is known that Islamic banks do not have the right to receive interest usurious income. A similar situation of practically interest-free lending is typical for Japan. These examples indicate that people's attitudes towards the production and distribution of products, the miserable existence of grain growers, teachers, miners, and the insane enrichment of representatives of banking structures in modern Russia are based on non-economic prerequisites. They are connected with vicious raviousness and the stemming from it unpravious, vicious laws. Within the framework of the socially useful economy, usury has to be categorically prohibited by law, and the loan interest should be strictly zero. Similar illustrations can be given from the sphere of raw materials industries. The subsoil bowels of the earth are given to the people living on this earth from God. They are not the result of labor. In the views of today's dominant chromatistics in society, oil produced by an oil company transforms into its private corporate property. Such a transformation is considered legitimate in the prevailing raviousness. In the view of a socially useful economy, any oil company should receive only legal remuneration for its work in oil production, because the work of teachers, doctors, and military is of no less importance to society. Oil, on the other hand, has to be in state ownership, and the profit from its sale has to go to the formation of the sufficiency and well-being of teachers, doctors, military men. Under the conditions of the dominance of chromatistics, The head of an oil company legally takes over this, in essence, national property, and according to the newspaper Kommersant number 130, July 26, 2002, has an official wage of about $3 million per month, which at least 20,000 times exceeds the wage of any teacher, doctor, or miner. Such disproportions in the remuneration of factually equal in qualifications and work intensity are recognized as socially acceptable. They led to the fact that up to 45% of laboring people of our country fell below the poverty line. Their regression from this position is not connected with the development and improvement of the dominant economic theory, but with a change in the nraviousness and conception of governance adopted in the society, with the transition of the country onto the rails of nravious economic politics, and with the development of a stemming from this fundamentally new socially useful economy.
After explaining the essence of your, indeed fundamentally new approaches, could you list the proposals to the country's leadership to transfer the country's economy into a scheme of crisis-free accelerated development?
The core of our proposals are changes in the country's monetary circulation system, in the vicious schemes of interaction between the financial credit system and the real production sector. Indeed, only in real production can we get the final socially useful result, solve the tasks aimed at the acceleration of development of production formed by our President Vladimir Putin. I will formulate 10 fundamental proposals that can transfer the country from a course of ruin to a course of prosperity. Number 1. We have to radically reform the central bank, retaining in it primarily the function of organizing cash flows necessary and sufficient for the national economic complex, and overseeing the country's banking system, to transfer the function of issuance of means of payment to the Treasury, which has to be a part of the Ministry of Finance, make the profits from issuance the property of the state. Number 2, we have to introduce into circulation the energy ruble, backed by the country's energy resources, gas, oil, electricity, returning the money into the commodity form, which was lost after the decree of the President of the United States 1971, which abolished the Bretton Woods Agreement on the gold backing of the dollar. Number 3, we have to ensure the stability of the energy ruble on the basis of the transition from the gold invariant of backing of the currency to the energy one. The money supply of the country should be sufficient for the functioning of the national economic complex and correspond to its scale and energy supply capacity, but not to gold reserves. At the same time, the size of the money supply should not change even if there is not a single gram of gold and not a single dollar in the country. Number 4, we have to introduce a legislative ban on receiving income outside the sphere of creation, on usury. Money should be given on an exclusively interest-free basis. The base rate of the central bank should be strictly 0. Number 5, we have to introduce a legislative ban on raising energy prices, on tariffs of natural monopolies. Such increases are a tool for unleashing inflation, destabilizing the production complex of Russia by means of impulsive disturbance of intersectoral price proportions. Under the conditions of the energy invariant, the increase in the prices of energy carriers only changes the scale of prices without changing anything in essence. Number 6, we have to introduce a legislative ban on export deliveries for any currency other than the Russian energy ruble. Ensure its additional issuance backed by Russian resources for the provision of loans to European states living at the expense of Russian resources. In this case, the energy ruble will become an externally convertible stable currency, since the volume of our exports is 2 times higher than the volume of imports. Number 7, by refusing to supply Russian resources to the world market for dollars, we have to ensure a stable increase in the ruble in relation to the dollar. Today it is in demand in Europe because for it one can buy the wealth of Russia. Number 8, avoiding administrative dictatorship, relying on the tendency to increase the ruble exchange rate by methods of market economy, we have to replace the dominant in the savings of the population dollar paper with full-fledged energy rubles. Number 9, we have to return the dollar funds accumulated by the state in paper and electronic media to international creditors, thereby removing the country from external usurious slavery. Number 10, we have to adopt a new law on subsoil, which would preserve any wealth received from the earth in pan-social state property. Any extracting company must have income strictly proportional to the amount of their labor. You can find all explanations, calculations related to these proposals in our reading resources.